Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
Hey everybody, this week we're going to end out our Cerebral Nightmares Festival with 2020's I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I'm Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Pulcher.
And if you like what you see/hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the spaces and places that people find good media.
That's right, folks. We do all sorts of festivals with directors and genres. We recast movies. We do 101s.
Punishment reviews. We do Forgotten Gems.
Yes, so please go check out the channel. We got tons of engagement. We're here every week.
Yes.
All right. I'm Thinking of Ending Things, the written for screen and directed by Charlie Kaufman movie. Probably the newest movie we've done, honestly.
I was about to say that. Yeah,
since
it definitely
we've started the channel on YouTube anyway.
Now, it's interesting because this movie, just for us personally, has a kind of interesting little history where I remember going camping with you and us sitting around the fire and talking about this book, and that you were almost all the way through the book, and you were like, I know that Kaufman is doing an adaptation of this, and you were like, and I have no clue how he's going to be able to do it, just from what you knew from reading the book. And so I was very interested to see it, and after I saw it, I didn't know what I thought of it. But all
Same.
I knew is that I kept thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
To quote a mutual friend of ours that was also on this camping trip, Taylor Williams, said that about a band I was in once. He was like, I listened to your CD and I didn't like it. And then I listened to it again and I was like, I don't know what these guys are doing. He's like, after my eighth or ninth time listening to it, I realized I was still listening to it. And he's like, and so that's a testament to, like, whether I liked it or not, it's so interesting because I couldn't stop listening to it.
Yeah, something's working.
I feel that way about this movie.
Yeah, you know what? I'm with you. The first time I watched it, I remember the camping trip, and I had finished the book at that point.
Okay.
And the whole time I was reading the book, I was like, this would make an awesome movie. Are the rights bought? Because this is fantastic.
Oh, wow.
And I went and looked, and of course, Charlie Kaufman had already signed on to do this
Sure.
for Netflix. And I was like, well, okay, all right. And I was very excited to see him do something that was a little more in the horror realm. And, this was originally written by, it is Ian Reid. Love the book. Absolutely love the book. And, it's a slow burn, but the ending is outstanding. Now, just like, Charlie Kaufman takes liberties with something like Adaptation, where he's doing the Orchid Thief, but he takes a lot of liberties in that one. Where this one, he does stay closer to the source material, and I do want to have a bigger conversation of book versus movie medium thing, because there's certain things about it, about the movie that he did take the liberties on that we can get into in a little bit. But in the press material that they sent out for this movie, it says, like in big bold letters, says the film is the film, the book is the book.
Wow.
On their press
so
material.
they made a caveat right out. They got it right out in front of it to be
Exactly.
like, don't get mad.
Now, it's really hard because I do want to treat things from a different thing because they are different mediums.
Kind of independently,
Independently, I absolutely love the book and would recommend it to anyone. And I really love the movie too. And they have separate things that are wonderful about them, and things that you could only do in a movie, and things you can only do in a book. For instance, throughout the book, there is little passages that don't have any reference of kind of some stream of consciousness thought before each chapter. And you don't really have that here, but it really added this layer. It gave us a break as the audience to kind of step away from what's actually happening. There's so much going on in this movie. And just like, and that's what Charlie Kaufman loves. I mean, he wrote the great Spike Jonze movies like Adaptation, we mentioned already, Eternal Sunshine, being John Malkovich. But then he went on to direct his own stuff and grew, did Schenectady, New York, which was his first film we reviewed years ago. And then Anna Melissa, which is goddamn outstanding, like a masterpiece, probably his best movie. And then he's done this. He's a very artistic, strange guy, right? And you know, you have the cast here of Jesse Plemons, Jessie Buckley as the girl, David Thewlis, and Toni Collette. Like, what an amazing... I've actually never seen Jessie Buckley before, but
I'd never seen her either. But oh my god, she's incredible.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Isn't she a British actress?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think she might be British. Like, wow.
And they play Jake, young woman, father and mother. And in the book, they actually don't name her. She's just
whereas here she has like more names than Martha, Marcy, May, Marlene. Like she has she has so many different iterations of Lucy, Lucille, all these different
through
things.
Most of the movie it's Lucy, but then it kind of changes.
Sometimes she's Lucia, like
Lucia. Yeah, there's a variety of things here, but they are different mediums, and I do think some liberties should be allowed. I'll get into whether I like those liberties or was kind of neutral on them. But I don't know. Should I detach myself? It's hard to. Should that ruin the movie for me? I don't know. Like,
I mean, I kind of feel like I kind of feel like in a way, and I'm saying this having not read the book. Mm-hmm. I'm more just talking about Kaufman in general.
I'm just talking about books versus movies in general.
Right. And I think I am too. But I think specifically with Charlie Kaufman, he. As a person, as an artist who is adapting a work, I think that what he does in the movie Adaptation is sort of like the flag on the moon in terms of like, here's what I think is possible. Because I think that it goes to such a strange place. And I think that Kaufman does this in general. And the closest that he's done it with another director would probably be Adaptation, but I think in Anomalisa, as well as Synecdoche, and definitely here, lots of directors like to play with gags, and I guess what I mean by gags is, what if the movie took this turn in it, right? Like you think about something like Tim Robbins in The Player. Like the movie in its third act goes to this almost like knee-jerky slapstick level of what Hollywood could be, but it still plays it seriously enough that it just happens in one or two scenes. Sure. Whereas Kaufman goes for it. You think about in Synecdoche when I'm at a loss for the actress's name, but I'll put it up here. When the actress, the one from Hannah and Her Sisters, when she takes over the production in Synecdoche, the whole tone of the movie itself changes because you're like, oh, there's a new director.
Are you talking about Adaptation Judi
Dench? It's not Judi Dench. I'll put it up here. I can't think of her name, but and obviously Adaptation does the same thing where Charlie's brother. What's Charlie Kaufman's brother's name?
I can't remember. He wrote the Three.
The Three, which I'm going to circle back to the Three in a second, but. Once his brother takes over, the entire tone of the movie changes. It becomes quite corny and like this stupid action film. And I think he does the same thing here, where once he is going to lean heavily into the musical aspects, and really this guy, this lamenting figure who's losing his mind, who really is thinking about ending things, once he kind of ramps up what he is finally in the final throes of his life. The fact that this turns into a pseudo musical and loses all touch with any semblance of reality, even though tonally I personally didn't love it, I'm like, this is Kaufman again, putting all his chips on the table and being like, we're headed here. We're headed here. We're leaving the earlier movie, right? And you have to either be with him or just fall away.
Definitely. I'm with you with the first time that I watched this. I was not sure what to think of it. The ending is quite different from the book. And we can get into the differences near the end of the episode. But so I was just kind of left a little like, wasn't sure. Like, it looks amazing. I mean, this is a very beautiful looking film. He does a great job of giving you this haunted feeling throughout. And just something's just off through the whole movie, right? You're not sure what it is. And I'm going to approach this as I haven't read the book, and you know, we'll get into the movie side of it. But you know, there's this is a very sad and surreal film, and you know, about mental health, about memories, about confidence, about suicide, just dark shit. It's a pretty dark shit. I mean, the book is equally as dark, if not darker. And again, I was really excited to see Kaufman do horror here. So so I was super excited to see what he does. And this really is more of just like a slow burn kind of trying to figure out what's going on type of movie. You know, it's essentially a girl who travels with her boyfriend. If we want to go like easy plot.
Let's go easy. Yes. Just give us an overview.
I mean,
easy overview.
Yeah. Just, this great rom-com about a girl who travels with her boyfriend to meet her parents in a secluded farm.
Yeah. There you go. And might be dead pigs with maggots falling out of them. There might be a naked old man walking through a high school. We don't know. It's a Charlie Kaufman film. Anything could happen. But you know, and I think that you know, interestingly, when you talk about this idea of thriller / horror, I mean, Kaufman came up with the idea for Synecdoche because the studio he was working for said, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing a horror film?" So his first horror film was Synecdoche, New York, which when you think about it, in his eyes, but when you think about it, you're like, yeah, that's a lot of the themes in that are way more horrifying than, you know, Freddy or Jason, right? Like possible brain tumors and the legacy you leave behind when you die. Those are terrifying thoughts, Charlie. Thank you for bringing them up in your horror
just
film.
In a different way. Well, he's so self-deprecating as a writer, as a director.
Yes.
And to me, that's kind of part of his charm. I definitely agree there's a point in a lot of his movies, all of them, honestly, that you have to decide, are you going to go on this journey and try and figure out what this is on or not? I think he does put all of his chips at the table at the end. It's a very Lynchian move, if you ask me, the way that he kind of ends it out.
Agreed.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I don't know.
It's a taste thing, right? Yeah. It's a taste thing. Now, I do feel like that from early on, and I mean like scene 1. And this voiceover coming on of awesome our wallpaper. Lucy, our Lucy character. We have this beautiful ornate wallpaper, which is this reoccurring theme, is this ornate wallpaper. And our protagonist, Lucy, immediately starting off with, "I'm thinking about ending things." Now, what we're to take from that is that she's thinking about ending her relationship with Jake. But the images that we're seeing, we don't know what they mean. We see an old Singer sewing machine. We see a very sad-looking little kitchen table in this old house. We see these images, and I guess when we first see it, we assume that this is her house.
Yep.
And she's doing this voiceover, and this voiceover carries through about 2/3 of the movie. About 2/3 of the movie is Lucy narrating from her perspective, but the longer it goes, the more we're wondering, does she even understand really what her perspective is? Because the movie keeps second guessing itself, and so we keep second guessing ourselves.
For sure. She's definitely an unreliable narrator.
Yes.
I think we could say that for sure. But yeah, I agree, this opening scene. And then we're also included with what you're talking about. We're seeing this house that you're talking about, but we're also seeing this old man kind of get ready for the day.
Yeah.
And not exactly sure why he's just thrown in there. And, you know, obviously we're setting some things up here, but
he also might be watching her while she's hailing Jake on the street from the window of what we think is her apartment. And at one moment we just see the back of him and he's old. And then the next time he's young. And so immediately we're like, what's happening? Who's this character?
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll get to that. Let's just say that, I guess. But, you know, the first probably, 30 minutes of this movie is a car ride. Yep. We're getting them going in the snowy night to this secluded farm that's, you know, a long drive away, at least an hour, if not more. And, you know, they seem new and they seem happy-ish, kind of, and it's a little weird, but it's also playful and cute sometimes. And, you know, she has this, you know, long, you know, I guess we can get into some of it, but they talk about pop culture, you know, a poet, you know, she's a poet, she's an artist, she's a variety of different things, you know, but he calls out, I believe it's a poet read his poems to a girl named Lucy, and she says, just like me. And
yeah, Wordsworth, and
right.
And what's interesting is that poem in particular, the ode, intimations on immortality, you know, it really is this combination of both like childhood brashness at not thinking about mortality, as well as age, and then the way in which stark landscapes influence those thoughts, which comes into later the dinner table conversation.
Where she's an artist. She's an artist. She reads this poem to him that she's recently written, and just like Kaufman loves a struggling artist, it doesn't matter. And the funny thing here, and there's an explanation for this near the kind of final reveal of why, but she's a variety of artists. She's not only a poet, she's a painter, and she's studying, is it psychology, I think, or
yeah, but then also like but then she's also studying like astrophysics.
She's
or
also
some
a waitress
thing.
Yeah,
like she's also a waitress with the Santa Fe burger and all these different things. And, and I one of the things I love about that also that keeps us one of the things that's ratcheting up that tension in a way is that tonally these conversations shift and shift and shift, where you know, they talk about the idea of viruses and then shitty movie ideas, and how a shitty movie idea can be like a virus.
Oklahoma.
And that those shitty movie ideas or musicals or any of these things want to grow just as much as anything else, or they also want to die as much as anything else. And sometimes they're happy and they're having these conversations in like a fun kind of postmodernist way, and then the next moment they're combative and they feel like they deeply dislike each other. And I will say that
I think that lends to how new of a couple they are, because, you know, she's going off and what is probably a pretty monumental thing in a relationship is meeting someone's parents, right? And
totally
and she takes that and kind of twists it up and messes it around, and you know, just plays with it in her head, and she's not sure, and you could tell that there's moments where they're kind of like, I don't really know this person, like in a way, like, right? Like you would in a first time relationship, but once you share that much time in a car and all that stuff, what does that mean?
And Kaufman plays with that really well, but the other thing that he does is that there's a secondary level of paranoia where so much of her internal monologue, it almost seems like Jake can hear her. He keeps interrupting her and saying, "Did you say something?" And like those moments, like completely make you like, right? Yeah. Like, wait, what's happening? Like, like it
happens through the whole movie, near all the way through the movie on certain things. When it gets to a point where she starts to question things, that's when we arrive to somewhere, or that's when
he interrupts her by saying,
"Oh, we're
here." Yeah, exactly. and I think that helps ratchet up the tension, but then the thing that keeps it not normal, but I guess keeps it more riveting than it becomes annoying, because I think if someone hadn't seen this, just hearing the way they were talking about the shifting of tones and the paranoia, I could see somebody being like, that sounds awful. And in some ways it can feel a little discomforting, but things like when she recites this poem, Bone Dog, that moment in and of itself, even if you don't like the movie as a whole, even if the 2 hours and 15 minutes at the end of it, you're like, to take it or leave it.
Yeah.
This recital of that poem that she does with those couple of tears running down her face while breaking the fourth wall and looking directly at the camera that is outside the car. Oh my God.
That's one of the Kaufman moments where I was like, okay, now I get where I see what you're, I could see your imprint on this even more now. When we're outside of the snowy car on the snowy dark road and she's looking directly in the camera through the window, I was like, I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that before.
I've never seen that before. And she says, you come back home with your mutant gifts to a house of bone. Everything you see now, bone.
Well, there's little things throughout this whole car ride that, we talked last week about Under the Shadow and the symbolism dripping. It's all over here. Once you know what's going on. I agree with you. This movie is not for everybody. I can't imagine everyone's going to love it. I didn't know what to think the first time, and I knew what was coming. And I have to say, the second time around, paying attention to this stuff and knowing exactly kind of everything that's going on, what to expect, it was a much, much better movie and more fun to dissect as a fan.
And wasn't it an itch after watching it the first time where you're like, what the like, I was kind of mad, I guess. I was like, by the end of it, I was like, what? I don't know. And but it was like an itch I couldn't scratch, where I kept just thinking about it for a couple days. And I was like, I got to go back. And upon the second, I've watched it 3 times now. And upon the second watching, I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty brilliant. And then watching it last night to prepare for this, I was like, okay, this thing is chock full.
Layers
chock
of stuff.
Full.
I'm just thinking some of the symbolism in this car ride, but he says long car rides are good. It reminds you the world is larger than the inside of your own head. When she looks in the mirror, it's cracked and broken and gone, and he keeps talking about her poem, and which is just totally sad as fuck what you're talking about. And he's like, it's like you wrote it about me, all this hopefulness and it's pretty interesting. I think by the time, maybe a little before they get to the parents' house, whether it's her inner monologue or just her reactions, her cold reactions to some of the things he says, she really pretty much through this whole movie doesn't really see a future with him, right?
No, it's like she's wondering why she's there. Yeah. She keeps starting back over and saying, he seems nice.
Yeah,
and
he's sweet. He's a gentleman.
But she can't figure out why she's there. And she's like, I haven't even told my parents about Jake. Now, the other interesting thing that's happening in this little nugget that's in there, and I won't jump too far ahead, but it's happening in the car ride when he's like, how about some music? And we see him going to turn the station. It's an old man's hand that has liver spots on it. And the radio that he's holding onto is the interior of an old red pickup truck. And once you've seen it, it's impossible to not see it. Although I didn't see it the first time around.
Me neither. Yeah, I did.
And once I saw it, I was like, God, that's brilliant.
And what is he turning on? Oklahoma.
Yep. Right? It just happens to pop right up in the middle of Oklahoma. That in particular is a song from Oklahoma that this young girl is singing about how she doesn't care about getting old. She's not worrying about getting old. She's not worrying about finding the man in her life. She doesn't even think about how the seasons change. And Jake says, methinks she doth protest too much, right?
Yep. Another thing he says is, this was the first kind of ding moment, if you know what's happening, is he says, they do it every few years.
And she says, who?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And he just keeps going on, but, that gets to a little bit of what we're seeing. And then we get cut to the old man who is a janitor inside the school, and you see them singing Oklahoma in the school. And so you can kind of piece a little bit together, maybe like, what are they talking, who is this guy? We keep seeing this guy throughout. Another thing that happens, and this is one thing in the book that I really wish they would have kind of honed in on a little more, is she keeps getting these calls from herself on the phone. On the phone.
Yeah.
Now,
it's in the book, strange.
It is, and in the book, it is way bigger of a thing. Like, it's happening constantly, where she keeps ignoring it, and sometimes she picks up and listens, and it's that whole thing about there's only one question to answer and all this stuff, and it's
the old man. It's the old man doing this like rambling,
an old man's voice, and you don't know who it is or what it is, and it's ramblings, and and by the end you figure out what it is. And I hate dancing around this stuff until we get there, but that was much more prominent and gave you way more of an eerie feeling. Honestly, like I said, I was excited to see Kaufman do horror, and the book is straight up horror sometimes, and he really strays away from that, especially near the end. And so there's elements there of what he's doing, and he does stay pretty true to the book. Not that made a huge difference. I understand there's certain liberties you have to take when you're making a movie. If she was looking at her phone the whole time, maybe it would have kind of killed some of the vibe inside of the car. But it was
maybe
much
a little
more
bit of the tension, possibly.
It was much more. It's what kept me going reading the book at the beginning. Was these little moments of like, what is this? Like, there's obviously something they're building up to. What's happening? And it was. There's just a bigger relationship with that inside of the car, and it just kind of induced anxiety even more. So, well,
I mean, I think this
not that this needs that.
I was gonna say I don't know then if it would need it, because this at least the first 2/3 of this movie, the anxiety that it induces is really like that is the key to everything. And I think one of the things that's interesting is, of course, we see this character that is not associated with our two main leads, and so we're trying to figure out how they might be associated. And the Oklahoma thing, they do it every year, does feel like, oh, there might be a connecting point, except we know that the old man, the janitor, is not far 50 years in the future, because it looks like it's a modern day high school. And our main characters have cell phones. And so we're like, even though he is driving a very old looking car, we're like, okay, so this isn't taking place in the 60s and this is him now. Yeah. So it's like,
what's happening?
Those associations we're trying to make, we can't.
You said something a long time ago when we reviewed a 21 Grams, the Sean Penn, Naomi Watts movie, and you said this movie, a lot of times movies are a puzzle, and you try and put them together and see if everything fits, and you're kind of doing that here, but truly by the end, it's what they did in that movie was take the puzzle and throw it up all in the air and let it land, and you just have to figure it out yourself.
That's how we're gonna fucking shoot it.
Yep.
It's like however it landed on the ground.
And I think they do that here, and that was built into the structure of Reid's book a bit, but he does a great job playing with time and just momentum throughout this movie, and you think it's going one way, and then this weird thing happens, and you're like, what? That's just a little off. Like I said, this movie just puts you a little off, and I thought it was just really well done. But
let's go from a little bit off to way the fuck off and get to this house, because I think that's when we really realize everything before that. I mean, I hate to pigeonhole him as a writer, but everything before that could be forgivable as just general Charlie Kaufman weirdness that may not have a supernatural aspect, may not have a science fiction aspect, and may just be the weird ass way people talk to each other. Because you think about something like Being John Malkovich, the supernatural aspect of Being John Malkovich doesn't show up for like a half an hour. And the first half an hour of Being John Malkovich is weird as hell. Yeah. And that's supposed to be the real world. Yeah. So I'm like, this might just be what's happening.
7th and a half floor, all that stuff. Yep.
Right, but then all of a sudden,
this could all be circumstantial, right? What they're talking about, they get into a lot of these conversations, and especially once they get into the house, they talk about death a lot, and not everything wants to live. Things, they go into this insects or suicide bombers, and
and she goes
best for their community, and then boom, right when that happens, pull up to mom and dad's house. and they start throwing.
Yeah, she goes, "Great, now we're all dead," and he's like, "We're here," and you're like, "So are they in hell? Like, what's happening?"
Yeah, and from right when they get out of the car, he doesn't want to go in. He's like, "Oh, let me show you the barn where there's all these dead animals and a few sheep."
Yeah, there's a few. Dead. There's a few sheep that are still alive, but the
why
lambs
start
are all
with
dead.
The barn?
Yeah, like I gotta stretch my legs before we go inside, and there's this creepy, again, it almost harkens back to not just because it's Toni Collette, but the fast waving that she's doing from inside the window also reminded me of a moment from Hereditary where I was like, I don't like that.
Her and David Thewlis are so good here. She's obviously amazing, probably the star of this show as far as the biggest star, because a lot of these actors are pretty kind of side characters in a lot of things.
Maybe Jesse Plemons.
Jesse Plemons can hold a few movies. He's definitely
what
done that before.
What do they like to call him? Meth Damon?
I heard Fat Damon.
Fat Damon. I like Meth Damon better.
I think he's earned the right for us to call him Jesse at this point. He's
true.
Not just the guy on Breaking Bad anymore.
No. He's an incredible actor. It's true.
He absolutely is. And Toni Collette is. So is David Thewlis. I recently watched the 3rd season of Fargo, and he plays the bad guy in it. And man, he is so good at playing a weird, creepy guy.
A fat woman is inherently untrustworthy as she is a sensualist who sees no real difference between a pastrami sandwich and a dick in the mouth.
I mean, he's amazing, obviously, in Harry Potter and stuff like that as well, but these actors are perfect at the parents, and they're both great at making you feel uneasy.
Yes. Now, before we meet them, they won't come downstairs.
Yeah, he puts on music, and we just sit and wait for his parents. And we kind of talk about the basement door that has all these scratches on it, and then
that are from the dog, but they're like 4 feet high. There's no way that's from a dog.
And there's no dog either until we see the dog, and all it does is shake itself off. And then as soon as that weird thing happens, they're here.
Yeah.
They're finally coming down. So it's like you're waiting for something weird to happen to not be explained to you, to divert yourself over here for something else, right?
Well, in the moment when they're talking about the basement and they're kind of doing a little, it's like they keep getting into these it's actually brilliantly directed, and I'm wondering, I kind of wish that I could see a behind the scenes moment of how the hell Kaufman directed the two of them. Was Kaufman saying, okay, now you as this figment have agency, and you're wondering, why the hell am I here in your fantasy? Like, is that
completely?
Is that what it's? Do you know what I mean though? Like, is that the direction that he's giving to her? Because in a moment like that, where she's like, "Ooh, it's down in the basement, it's evil," and Jesse Plemons goes, "Yeah, don't go down there. He's waiting for you." And she's like, "What do you mean he?" And he's like, "No, I was just playing along with you."
He's
and she's
hiding
like,
in there. They're scary.
What are you talking about, right? Like, like all those layers. Once you've watched it a second time and know what's happening, are so obvious. Even though that sounds weird to say, because
it's true.
It does dance around everything so much. But I'm like, it's such a mind melter.
The first time you watch this, you think it's trying too hard, right? It's trying to just be too hard to be too weird, especially when you don't know what's going on.
Yes, agreed.
And I agree that the couple here is so good because they are playful and cute, and like she has really like good cheesy dad jokes, and everyone laughs at them, and except for Jake, who is just constantly embarrassed by his parents and like also constantly like kind of rejecting affection a lot. Like whenever his mom tries to touch him or kiss him, he kind of pulls away. But that only really starts when they show up, right? Mm-hmm. Like before that, his character is very different. His character is much more affectionate towards her. He's very introspective and fun. And the second that they show up, he clams up and definitely becomes sort of a 12-year-old, right? I mean, he still is an adult, but he, like you're saying, he's like not affectionate, and he's constantly like, not genius edition, genus edition, right? He's like mad.
in this way. And even Lucy
he has these like outbursts of embarrassment, right? Like, and you don't know why. You're like, why are you so riled up about this? So
yeah, like you wanted to come to the house. Well, and even him saying, well, she says, well, we were invited, right? And he's like, well, invitation sounds so formal, but there was a discussion, and you're like, oh my God, what a weird thing to say.
Yeah. We've had correspondence.
We've had correspondence, yeah. Well, and the other part of that too, like the way these dispositions keep jumping around, the facts start jumping around even worse than before too. Like, whereas before we could at least accept that maybe she is in grad school and also a poet and these other things, once they're in the house, she grew up in a farmhouse, and then literally less than 90 seconds later, she grew up in an apartment. like that's how quickly the tonality of it changes. Sure. And you go, wait a minute. I definitely remember that.
Yep, that happens.
I've paid enough attention, right?
Yeah, exactly. That happens also with how they met. There's this great discussion at dinner about how they met, and it was at a trivia night, and then later it turns out that they met in a different way, and you're like, wait, didn't you say something different?
Yeah,
like she was a waitress, like, or something like that.
And now, then before that even happens, the aging of the parents is so deliberately obvious to us from when they come down the stairs to then we know. I would say the moment that we know, well, never mind. I was going to say the moment that we know that something magical or supernatural is happening is when she turns around and the dinner table is all set and the candles are there and that entire kitchen is changed and even their ages have changed. But then I realized that there was also an animated pig that talked to her in the car ride. So I take that back. The animated pig is the moment that we realize something is afoot.
Well, the animated pig doesn't come till the end.
Oh, the animated pig she sees in...
Oh, okay.
On the billboard while they're driving. It turns and looks at her and says, "Join us, won't you?"
Yes,
that's right. And I went, "Oh shit! Okay, we're headed someplace here."
That's right. I was mistaken. During this dinner, they have this discussion about art and the paintings and everything, and that she does landscape. And like, how can a landscape painting make you feel sad if there isn't a sad person looking at it?
Is that in the book?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Yes.
God, because that to me, I would say, if there wasn't anything before it, that was the moment that Kaufman was like, I have to make an adaptation of this as a movie. Because that's such a Charlie Kaufman realization, right? Is like...
It's surreal, yeah.
Well, it's this, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, right? Like, it's one of these kinds of things where it's like, if you make the adaptation, does that then make it... Did that change the idea because you decided to make it into a movie? Like,
and she's like, well, put yourself into the painting. He's like, well, I could still look down and see my legs. He's being so literal.
I'm not a ghost.
I'm not a ghost. Did you notice? I need
to see a person being sad in order to know that it's a sad moment. I love it. Oh.
A few things that I noticed this time around. Nobody eats anything the whole time in the dinner scene. There's this food, even when she's pulling the food off the table back into the kitchen, everything is full.
She's pulling full plates of everyone's stuff.
Yeah,
off.
Like, are you finished with that? He also gets a really great Billy Crystal dig in here for the movie about Forget Paris. Such a random thing. And Billy Crystal's a Nancy.
Billy Crystal's a Nancy. Can we talk about the makeup and prosthetics here? I've never seen anything as realistic as the aging and then de-aging of the parents.
Yeah.
It is frightening. And obviously a huge part of it goes to the acting. When David Thewlis comes in and he's like, it's a child's bed. It's not meant for fucking, right?
Yeah.
Like, that whole sequence is amazing. But my God, he has the jowls.
Yep.
And so does she. Like,
she does at the end, yeah, or near her last scene,
which is only a bigger joke for our end sequence of the movie with the theatrical makeup. But here, I mean, it is. Every time I've seen aging makeup on actors, even if it looks good, it doesn't look this good. I've never seen anything. I don't know if it's partially CGI. I have no idea how they did it, but my God.
Yeah, there's even one when she's in the kind of hospital bed near the end that's just as crazy. I agree.
Yeah.
They're obviously we're getting into a little of where this movie starts going off the rails. When
Definitely.
I think kind of the last thing we really question is they make a big deal about her listening to the voicemail. Finally she because it keeps ringing. Yes. And they finally make her do it, almost pushing her to do it. And then when they get into meeting each other, she was like, oh, that was like 6 weeks ago, I think, or gosh, it seems like forever ago. And we start kind of blurring time a little bit. And then just a reminder that we're getting intercut with the janitor watching a rom-com directed by Robert Zemeckis.
Oh my God.
So good.
This is the most random, and it is the best. It's a great reprieve joke in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, we're like, why the hell is that there? But then later, our actress who she plays the press secretary, and later the lead in the Boys.
The Boys.
I don't know if yeah. Mm-hmm. I can't think of the actress's name, but she's great.
I know who you're talking about, the redhead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we realize later that this little nugget in here is a hearkening back to the virus conversation, right? Mm-hmm. This virus conversation of like the shitty romantic ideas they get locked into our head from Hollywood, mm-hmm. and they grow there like a virus because they don't want to die either. And that is sort of what this Robert Zemeckis, which apparently in an interview they were like, what do you got against Zemeckis? And he's like, nothing. Honestly, he's like, it was like names out of a hat. We decided on Zemeckis. And he was like, in his defense, he hasn't directed anything that even looks like this in decades.
Yeah.
He's like, but it was just a funny thing. And he's like, and actually they, apparently Zemeckis contacted him. He saw it and was like, that's funny.
Yeah.
Like, good for you. So yeah, I think he was happy to get name checked in that way.
Sure. He has a sense of humor, I think.
A hilarious moment.
So we start going into these rooms, people disappear. Jake is not coming back. She's sitting around waiting. She sees the picture of her childhood picture on a wall, and he's like, no, that's me. So we're getting all these conflicting weird things happening inside this house. Then she goes upstairs into his childhood bedroom. The very old Thulis father character comes in and goes over that. So
before we leave, let's talk about this bedroom, because there is, and I don't know if you did this upon second watching, but I know I did. She walks into the bedroom and she scans the room, and then POV, the camera, scans the room.
Mm-hmm.
And if you pause that and go frame by frame, the entire movie is explained to you.
Huh.
The books on his shelf.
Oh, yeah.
The DVDs that are stacked up. The photos on the wall.
Yep.
I did it. I went frame by frame, and wow. My God, everything is here. Okay,
wow.
Whether you're talking about the Wordsworth book of poetry the ode is from, the John Cassavetes copy of A Woman Under the Influence, or if you're talking about Pauline Kael's book of movie reviews, or if you're talking about the Eva HD Rotten Perfect Mouth book that the Bone Dog poem is in, everything is there. Mm-hmm. Like the entire semblance of this personality of Jake, which apparently this is his childhood bedroom that he hasn't been back to in decades.
His childhood bedroom that has a copy of They Live in It, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like or DVDs even. I mean there's so many anachronisms here in terms of a lineage of timeline that make no sense at all.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm saying. He plays with time here. The book plays with time. But I mean, if you were trying to impress a girl, you would talk about the things you know about, right?
So now at this point, we do get to see Toni Collette suddenly super, super young, talking mm-hmm. about Jake as if he's a baby,
mm-hmm.
and like, well, he just needs this and he needs that. Now, will you take this dirty nappy or whatever? It was like his pajamas that have like spit up on him or something. Take him down to the basement, and she doesn't want to go down there. And once she goes down there, suddenly Jake shows up again. but his protests are muffled out. We can barely hear him warning her not to go down there. Now, again, in true horror movie fashion, don't go in the basement. We're like, what's going to be in the basement? Now, because it's Charlie Kaufman, there isn't a monster down there. Instead, there's just lots and lots of wet laundry in an old 60s washing machine that's all from the same high school, and obviously the janitors. At that point, we go, oh, we have a connection to our other story.
There's the RHS is on the insignia on his stuff, yeah.
We finally have a connection. That's our first moment, I think, where we go, oh, our stories are converging, right?
Yep. And then you also see the paintings of landscapes by Jake down there as well. But yes, nothing horrific. I love that they finally did that. Her as a young mother, you could really tell that in that scene where she's picking up the toys, how much she kind of resents her child or doesn't understand him and kind of what he's talking about. He kind of became too intelligent for her or something like that.
Yeah, well, and I actually think that those paintings too are not only are they horrifying for us to realize that she didn't make them, and so she is in some sort of a manufactured reality, which we're pretty sure of by that point, but it still feels a little shocking. But it's even more shocking, or not shocking, but sad, that the posters are all by an artist named Ralph Blakelocks. And they're brilliant. I mean, they're haunting, incredible landscapes. And that Jake's are these, like, sad imitations of them. Right? They're some kind of a probably teenage, like, I'm going to do this thing. Kind of like, I'm going to be an artist. And at that point, we're starting to realize that, like, this might be our janitor. Or at least it's dawning on us there might be a connection there. And it feels really sad, right? It feels like, is he this guy who's created this reality that she's stuck in?
For sure. And she's hinting this whole time, like, hey, we need to get back. I got to work in the morning. Like, she wants to leave. She's ready to leave.
And he's like, I got chains. I got
chains. We're fine. I got chains.
She goes back upstairs and sees that there's that Toni Collette's character is on hospice, and looks out that window, and there's no snow except for just on the car, which is like the most perfect Charlie Kaufman image.
Yep, I thought the same
right?
thing.
I mean, that is like some like put it in a bottle and save it, because that is like pristine.
It's
imagery.
wonderful. Yeah, it's only snowing on their car. They do finally leave and have that Cassavetes conversation about a woman under the influence, which is kind of back and forth, kind of.
Well, and suddenly Lucy doing a full-blown imitation of Pauline Kael. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched any Pauline Kael interviews.
Well, I hope that men will not give up exploring their fantasies, because that's one of the most fertile fields in movies. And as a matter of fact, the recent film Bertrand Blier's Get Out Your Handkerchiefs goes even further than Peckinpah's ever dared into those areas. Peckinpah has never really explored sex beyond a few glimpses in Straw Dogs. I think you might see some real sour rage about women coming out, and it might be quite marvelous.
She just slips into it. Now, right after that, she also slips into, literally, the character from the Robert Zemeckis film, the redheaded girl.
That's right.
Like, she becomes her at one point.
Yeah.
Right? Like, now we're off the rails completely.
You know, we take another long drive, and it's ice cold, dark, freezing outside, and he wants to get ice cream from Tulsi Town.
Yep.
And we're on this icy road that's just completely isolating. And as soon as the conversation starts getting weird again, he says, I see the kids at school ostracized at school every day. And then she's like, what school? And boom. Hey, we're here, Tulsi Town. And then, and then just another example of her getting cut off when things start getting weird. But we get these kind of vapid, mean girls, and
we're pretty sure we feel like we've seen them before somewhere.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that they're even open and someone wants ice cream in the middle of this ice storm is just odd in itself.
Well, and then his reactions are odd too. I don't like some of the girls who work here. They won't come if they know it's me.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And you're just like, wait, what?
And then,
like,
then
what
this girl with a rash comes and actually helps them and kind of gives her a warning of don't move forward in time. Kind of, she smells, there's the smell of varnish in the back, but it's not varnish. And she's scared for you. And like just all these hints of these thoughts creeping in, right?
He wants to throw away his ice cream now because like he barely touched it because he forgot how sweet it would be. Yeah. And so he can toss it over here at this high school that he knows about that he went to. And she's like, why are we headed out here? Like what high school is out here? And then all of a sudden they open up to this magnificent, huge, very sort of like old Gothic looking high school. Mm-hmm. And he's going to throw away their Tulsi Town.
There's got to be a garbage can around here somewhere. You're just like, are you taking her out to kill her somewhere? That's what you're
right. Thinking. That's what it feels like. It feels like
you're
this
going
super
somewhere.
Weird thing.
And he keeps talking about being ostracized, and he gets into David Foster Wallace essay. It talks about how pretty people are appealing, and younger is better, and more admirable and hopeful. Which makes us think, okay, we're at a high school now. Like, where is he going with this? And then he gets out of the car and then kind of runs away, goes further past the actual trash can that was there, and then comes back, and you're like, okay, he's back. And then they kind of start getting into this fight, and he calls her Ames. And she's like, that doesn't sound like my name.
Some weirdo pervert is watching the two of them kiss.
Well, after they fight about baby, it's cold outside, right? There's a whole fight
exactly.
about that.
There's a whole thing about baby, it's cold outside.
Someone's watching us.
And he runs into the school. Mm-hmm. She ends up following him into the school.
Well, she gets locked out of the car.
She gets locked out of the car, and before that, she's wondering, very in a very premonitory way, freezing to death. Maybe that won't be that bad, right? She wonders that to herself.
Yep.
And then gets locked out of the car, runs inside, and runs into our janitor. Mm-hmm. And says, I'm looking for my boyfriend. And he says, what does he look like?
Tries to avoid him.
She starts into this diatribe. And this is where so many facts about the movie start falling apart in this brilliant way, where she's like, one of the first things she says is like, I don't know, just like a guy. I only saw him a couple of times. And then she says, I was there with my girlfriend and we were celebrating our anniversary. Mm-hmm. And then right after that, she says, I wish my boyfriend would have been there. And you suddenly go, wait, who are you? And you're like, you are this cobbled together idea that doesn't make any sense. You are a neurophysicist and an artist and a poet and a lesbian was there with her girlfriend and also looking for her boyfriend and everything else, right?
I think more than likely it comes down to that she was just someone that Jake ran into at a bar sometime and probably didn't get his number.
Yep.
It's it's kind of funny because when when she hides from him, she kind of first is kind of dodging him, and he kind of slowly comes up and talks to her. In the book, this is way more horrifying part of a movie, and I wish they kind of kept with this. But there's a lot more of a cat and mouse game going on, and her running through the hallways and figuring out what's going on and where she is. Doors are locked. There's chains on the doors. All of a sudden, becomes way more horrific. And then once we're in the school, she kind of goes away at that moment. At least from what her character has been. Like, she kind of finally realizes that she doesn't know what she is. And us as an audience are really confused at this point. Because you're like,
deeply confused.
What is happening here? And it's funny when the janitor starts talking, he's muted as well, but you kind of hear an echo in the background, like a ringing in your ears kind of thing. But she talks about it. It's like describing a mosquito when she's trying to describe, like, it's like describing a mosquito that bit me 12 years ago camping or something like that. But
it's so sad. Like, now realizing that this is something that's happening within our main character's mind, the fact that even his fantasy version can't stay because she doesn't buy it is so sad, right? Like even the girl of your dreams in your dreams is like, what the fuck am I doing here? Right? like you've made her into a real enough actualized character that she's confused and bored and ready to get the hell out. And you're like, at the God, same, could there be anything sadder than that?
Absolutely. I mean? And you know, at the same time though, it's also very safe and quiet in there, right? She even hugs him as she's leaving because she feels sad for him.
Well, because he says, I haven't seen anyone except you. I see you.
Now, previously in the movie, we've seen the Oklahoma kind of rendition in the hallway of these two kids dancing and practicing, and they kind of stumble over each other. Now we get a much more beautiful version of this dance, and you almost get the history of their life together through this dance. It's actually
and what could be, what
could have been. You know, it actually turns very beautiful, especially once they get into the gym when it's snowing, and it really becomes this play. You know, and he dies a hero saving her. Right, like that's
because the older version, the real version of himself, is the villain who's chasing them around, right? Yep. And I think that okay, now might be as good of a time as any.
Yeah, let's just do it.
Let me start with this. So, in adaptation, Charlie Kaufman has a twin brother who's a shitty writer and who comes up with the three.
But here's the twist. We find out that the killer really suffers from multiple personality disorder, right? See, he's actually really the cop and the girl. All of them are him. Isn't that fucked up? The other thing is, there's no way to write this. Did you consider that? I mean, how could you have somebody held prisoner in a basement and working in a police station at the same time?
Trick photography.
Okay, that's not what I'm asking. Listen closely. What I'm asking is, in the reality of this movie, where there's only one character, right? Okay? How could you... What exactly would... I agree with Mom. Very taut. Sybil meets, I don't know, Dress to Kill.
And I have long, you and I both have long ruminated about this joke of like what a corny movie that is, and that John Cusack basically starred in a version of the three a couple years later called Identity, that was just all characters inside of a schizophrenic's mind.
Yeah.
But it cannot just be coincidence that Charlie Kaufman directed basically his own version of the three called I'm Thinking About Ending Things.
Yep.
It is an entire story of a relationship that takes place with imaginary characters inside of one man's head, right? But in true Kaufman fashion, there would be no linear thought process. There would be no reality that it's mooring enough for our characters to truly believe that they're there. And in this version of reality, our characters, however fictional they might be, are self-actualized enough that even those fictional versions go, wait, what the fuck is happening? Like, something's wrong here.
For sure.
Right? Like, this can't be real. In a way that, like, no character from an episode of Twilight Zone ever would. Right? Every character in an episode of Twilight Zone would go to the very end of the episode still believing, like, I'm real. But in a Charlie Kaufman Twilight Zone episode, from frame 8, they go, why can't I remember if it's been 6 weeks or 8 weeks we've been dating? That seems really weird. Now I'm a little paranoid, right? And that they themselves would untangle and unravel the reality. And that's what happens to Lucy, is that Lucy ends up discovering for herself. It doesn't come as a shock to her. She eventually goes, oh, I'm not real. Right? Like,
it goes away.
It goes away.
You know, I mean, you're getting to kind of the reveal here, but, you know, Jake is the old man janitor. It's been him the whole time, where in his head, he suffers from all sorts of depression. He's thinking of ending things. You see him suffering in the car near the end where he starts taking off his clothes. I think this movie is, one of the best movies of the year. After multiple rewatches, it's absolutely fantastic. It's beautiful and artistic and meaningful, and really, especially at the end here, without saying very much. There's a pretty big gaps of actual dialogue. We see the dance, we go through all of that, and then we kind of follow him out to his car where he's struggling, and he takes off his clothes even though it's freezing cold out here.
And then we get this beautiful soliloquy with this animated pig.
Yeah. Talking to him and the Tulsi Town song and all that stuff.
Like you talk about unique. I don't even know how you come close to the unique aspect of this that somehow is, and the pig says, yeah, it's hard being the pig with maggots coming out of its belly, but somebody's got to be him.
Mm-hmm.
So why not you? And you just go, hell yeah, I feel that, man. Like, it's there's nothing silly about it once it gets there. Like, as you said, if you've gotten on the ride and you bought your ticket, by the time it gets there, you're like, I get this. I get where we are. Like, this makes sense to me.
And so after he is naked, he gets out of the car again and goes back into the school, following this pig with the maggots falling out, and it's leaving a trail throughout the whole school. He's naked, and we see the pig walking in front of him, this awesome animated pig, and he's obviously the pig with maggots. Like, he's that useless person. He's a useless janitor at some school, never did anything with his life. And he walks into the hall, and the younger version of Jake that we've seen the whole movie is accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, and then sings a song from Oklahoma. And the audience of high schoolers has this old people makeup on during his speech. Like, he's supposed to be the play version of the old janitor. And anyways,
but the other thing that's happening in that scene, right? Where he's accepting the award.
Mm-hmm.
That speech, until he starts the Oklahoma song, that speech is word for word from A Beautiful Mind.
Oh no! Oh, is it really?
It's from The Beautiful Mind,
which is another
it's another DVD that's on Jake's childhood wall,
and
it's word for word that speech.
Most important discovery of my life.
It is only in the mysterious
equations of love
that any logical reasons can be found.
That any logical reasons can be found. I'm only here tonight because of you.
You are the reason I am.
You are the reason I am.
Because to me, at least my takeaway, is again in the same way that earlier Jake and Lucy are talking shit about saccharine sweet bullshit Hollywood movies and the way they try to grow inside your brain, is that we do have this guy who is actually an old man who didn't get to live any of his dreams. And obviously from his fantasy world is a really smart guy, but suffered from mental illness, suffered from all these things, and ended up becoming a fucking janitor, right? And that a movie like A Beautiful Mind paints with this broad brush of like, here's what mental illness is like. You can still win the Nobel Peace Prize, right? And that everyone is in this phony ass makeup, down to the point when he says, some of you are figments of my imagination. When he says that, the camera focuses directly on, in old lady makeup, Lucy, because she never really existed and she's never really there, right? And so it's like this same phony ass bullshit that Hollywood tries to stuff down our throats of like, here's what the end of your life could be, is that you could still be surrounded with these accolades, is just as phony as it was within Jake's dream. And so the movie plays it out in whole. that acceptance speech is word for word verbatim from A Beautiful Mind.
Wow, I did not get that part. I did not put that together. So good.
I did some research on that and was like, and I went and watched the scene and was like, oh my God, it is.
Well, once we get that final reveal too of who Jake is, and he is the janitor, and that we've been in his head the whole time, and he's the voice of everyone in this movie, just like in Anomalisa. Everyone else is Tom Noonan through the whole movie. But so we get to that part, and you start realizing like, oh, all of those voicemails are suicidal thoughts trying to get back in and interrupt what his actual dreamlike state is doing. You get the broken mirror. You get all these references throughout the whole movie, and this lifetime of failure in his eyes. And he's become suicidal. Now, the final thing I'll say is the end of the movie and the book is way scarier, way more straight up horror than this movie is. So although I appreciate kind of what Kaufman did, and it does work, and it did take a few viewings for me to realize that, and it is its own thing. I again was really excited because the end of the movie and the twist you don't really know till like the last page, and he eventually, the janitor, finally, after this cat and mouse game that's very terrifying, he finally meets up with her and has that conversation, and they go into some room where he is kind of pent up, or just kind of where the janitor stays, and takes a hanger and she sticks it through his throat and kills him. And that's the end of the book. And so way more brutal, way more horror. And I was really hoping Kaufman would kind of go there, because that's, once you realize that it's been Jake the whole time, it's pretty brutal. And
what's interesting about that though is like, I feel like for as cynical and sometimes downright psychotic Kaufman can be, which I think, again, Synecdoche is way more psychotic than even I'm thinking of Ending Things is, and cynical than it. He's kind of a softie. He kind of can't. He's ever done has ever gotten close to that kind of real. Well, the darkest, I suppose, his darkest movie actually is Being John Malkovich, where our main character is inside Malkovich's body, and he's like, "Please look away, please look away." That's probably the most cynical he's ever gotten.
For sure,
I don't know that he's been into murdering people, right?
For the most part, no. And he does give a bit more glimmer of hope than the book does, for sure. But from an experience standpoint, I loved the book and was wrapped up into it the whole time. And then the final reveal of Jake being the old man, and everyone inside of everything that we've been listening to for this last time. Right when I read the book at Barnes and Noble, when I read the title, I was like, oh, that's about somebody killing themselves. So, but the way they start
like that,
the way they start off the movie, they treat it like, oh, I'm thinking of ending things with this person. Right. And it slowly reveals that that's not all of what's going on here. Wonderful movie, wonderful book. Highly recommend both. A little different experiences, but I think both are admirable and well done.
I totally agree. And the last thing I'll say is that I think it's really interesting that it would have been so much easier for Kaufman to have given us some breadcrumbs along the way by either A, making the main part of the movie into a period piece, which would give us a little bit more allowance. The fact that it's so anachronistic, the fact that the poem that's recited was published in 2015, right? But then things like, oh, old age isn't for sissies, and then Jake says, well, somebody might take account with her using the word sissies, like all feels very current. And you go, is that something that a 70-year-old janitor, is he like trying to pull things from the kids he sees nowadays and imagining if he was a kid now. But it's like all of those things challenge our understanding of what might be happening until the sheet is really pulled out from underneath us. And I think that all that kind of stuff really lends itself to something where I just think I am still so glad that there are directors that are willing to not treat us like dummies.
Yeah.
And say, this is going to be really challenging. And this is going to be, you're going to have to, if you want to see what the sights look like from up here, you're going to have to climb this mountain with me. And I really respect him for that.
Yeah, the opposite of Robert Zemeckis. Just kidding.
Great movie. You're not wrong.
Great movie, great festival. Cerebral Nightmares is now finished. We are going to do a 101 episode next week about the art of mental terror in films. Talk a little bit about the art of mental health through a variety of films. So please look out for that. Please like and subscribe to all the spaces and places. You know what to do. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Email us at deepdivefilmschool@gmail.com. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, all that stuff. This has been an awesome fest. Really,
you did the whole thing. I don't even have to try. I just you went through the whole 9 yards.
There you go.
I'm just gonna sit here and look pretty.
That's your job. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We love you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.
We'll see you guys next week. Bye. You know how, like, I was thinking the other day, I was telling a story that, like, was definitely, like, an older story to me. It was something that happened, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. But the person I was telling the story to is only in their 20s. And so when I made a reference to...
Are you gonna Andy Rooney on us right now?
No. I'm just thinking about this, and I was like,
is it Andy Rooney of me to say Andy Rooney because no one knows who Andy Rooney is?
Oh yeah, no. Listen, I sent Jeremy Chatelaine a joke today where I was like, mission accomplished, and got a picture of W. Bush on the aircraft carrier, and I put it up in Slack, and then I was like, oh my god, that joke is older than some of our employees. Which is true. But no, the story that I was telling, like, part of it had to do with that somebody had a cassette tape. And like cassette tapes are kind of back in the punk scene. Like I got a bunch of them right over there, but like it definitely like dated my story. It made me sound like the story was like 60 years old or something. And I was thinking about that from like the last decade. And I was like, okay, like what are some things, like if you said now, like, oh, let me get my phone and I'll send you a Vine. Like that sounds dated because you're like, it was like a thing that was around and now it's gone.
MySpace would be another one, yeah.
MySpace would be another one, but I was thinking in terms of media, which is the reason why I said Vines, because I was like YouTube has been like the ubiquitous thing now for like, what, 12 years, 13 years? Like it's been around for a while,
At least, yeah.
So like, but is there like Blu-rays are still the thing. Is there going to be a time when you say Blu-rays? Okay. How about this?
Probably.
Is there going to be a time?
If it's not already, yes.
where people are like, what's that wall behind Pulcher? They're like, dude, he's old school. They're Blu-rays. I mean, and I have records, but those have kind of come back. So I don't know. Like,
I mean, I have DVDs above the Blu-rays too that you can see as well, and those are even more outdated.
What about VHS tapes? Do you have any VHS tapes?
Nope, don't have any of those. This, I believe, is probably going to be the last physical media for movies. So, you know, I still buy some, not a lot. I used to buy them, as you can tell, on a weekly basis. Buy quite a few. But that helped because I had various jobs where I could get shit super cheap. So
there's also the ephemera thing, though, of like showcasing it, right? Like the way you would with books, right? Where it's like somebody comes over. So how about this? Will there be a future where you just have your catalog of your the movies that you have on streaming, and it just projects a
like
hologram?
Stock market. Yeah, it's a stock market in the background just going.
It's just it's like a projection hologram that's just the spines of like not physical copies of what you have in your collection.
That makes sense. I could see that.
Right? Mm-hmm. So it's all in the cloud, but then you just have like an empty wall in your house where your smart home projector just projects what's behind you, but it's just a projection. Like you don't physically own anything.
Here's all the stuff I like.
Yeah, here's the things I like. That's all it is when it boils down to it. It doesn't matter anymore that you own a physical copy of a thing, right?
I remember the moment I felt old, and it was when I was listening to the oldie station, and REM's Losing My Religion came on. And I was like, oh, that's from my generation.
Yeah, you're like, I can distinctly remember a time listening to this when this came out.
Yes.
And you're like, oh no, I'm an oldie.